The day will come when we will name names other than Sean Combs, and there's a lot of names. This is the beginning of what I hope to be a national dialogue. This type of sexual assault, sexual abuse, and sexual exploitation should never happen in the United States or anywhere else. This should have never been allowed to go on for so long.
Tony Buzbee, the Texas attorney who vowed to file over 120 lawsuits against Sean Diddy Combs, is now facing a lawsuit himself, this time from a prominent figure accusing him of extortion. And with more potential lawsuits on the horizon for Diddy, it is now Buzbee's tactics that are under fire. A high-profile John Doe is fighting back, accusing the attorney of making up lies to get money out of him. I'm going to be speaking with a former prosecutor to get to the bottom of these new accusations. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Tony Buzbee. He is an attorney we have been talking about a lot lately because he has been representing over 100 people in lawsuits or potential lawsuits to be filed against Sean Diddy Combs. But now he is on the receiving end of a lawsuit. A person who is staying anonymous, only known as John Doe, has accused Buzbee of trying to get money by making up false stories about serious crimes like sexual assault and threatening to tell the public, basically filing lawsuits if he doesn't get paid. This is essentially extortion. That's what the allegation is. Now, this lawsuit was filed in Los Angeles on Monday, and as for what we know about the John Doe, he describes himself as a high-profile individual who knows music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, has attended events with him. He's also being represented by Quinn Emanuel, which is a very big law firm in the country. So I'm going to break down this lawsuit, or what we know about the lawsuit. And for that, I want to bring on former prosecutor Melba Pearson, who is actually the director of the prosecution projects as well. Melba, good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Great to be on, Jesse. Thank you for having me.
So talk to me just what you think about this overall. You know, an attorney who vowed to bring forth countless lawsuits against Diddy, now facing a lawsuit of his own. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, at first blush, when I heard about this, my initial instinct was, is this a setup by Diddy? I would not be surprised, especially with the allegations of witness tampering now that he's been, behind bars, incarcerated until his trial comes about next year. And he's been using three-way calls to be able to circumvent the rules where he's not allowed to speak to certain people. Well, he's getting to speak to those people by using three-way calls, by using other incarcerated people's accounts to be able to get those calls out, to encourage people not to testify, to pay them, etc. So it makes me wonder if, as part of this, to discredit Tony Buzbee and discredit the survivors that come forward and disclose to him, that he's trying to sully their reputation so that when they eventually come and testify in his case, they can be cross-examined on the fact that, you're involved in this lawsuit, you basically tried to extort other people, etc. So that's the first thing that hit me about this. I hope to be wrong.
There's two ways to look at that. One, you could be 100% right. Two, you're so jaded. Diddy's not behind everything. Keep that in mind, though. Keep that in mind. We're going to talk about this. First question I have for you, actually, do you think a judge is going to allow this John Doe to proceed with this case anonymously? Why do I say that? Because I recently covered a decision by a judge in one of the other sexual assault lawsuits against Sean Combs, and the judge there said that the Jane Doe who had been suing him, she didn't provide compelling reasons to remain anonymous, that Sean Combs has a right to know who she is, a right to challenge her. She was the one who brought this lawsuit, so she put her credibility at issue. They also made the judge also made the note that other people have sued Sean Combs. They revealed themselves. So I'm curious if you think that in this case, if you have somebody who's suing Tony Buzbee, will they have to reveal themselves at some point?
I think they will have to reveal themselves. I feel that Tony Buzbee would be fighting tooth and nail to make sure that this person reveals themselves. And, they're going to talk about it almost as a matter of great public importance, right? That the people have a right to know who this person is that's basically trying to come after survivors in theory, right? So there's that aspect. And again, much to your point, what would be the compelling reason for that person not to reveal their identity? Now, to take the other side of this, it's possible that they can argue that, listen, this person is trying to extort me, and they know that my stature in the community is of such that with these allegations, I could lose roles, or I could
Yeah.
lose contracts, or I would have some financial loss as a result of my identity being revealed. So I think that could
Yeah.
be the avenue they would travel down.
No, I think you're right, because I think identity is the central key question here. The allegation was that he is being extorted so that his identity wouldn't be revealed, that he wouldn't be connected to Diddy, who's incredibly toxic right now. It would be unfair for him to now have to reveal himself for this very purpose. Talking a lawsuit like this, how could I not mention Morgan & Morgan, specialists in litigation, America's largest injury law firm, our proud sponsor. If you should get hurt, this firm may be who you want in your corner. They have an incredible track record, like recent verdicts of $12 million in Florida, $26 million in Philadelphia, both of these higher than the highest insurance offers in these cases. There's no upfront fee. The whole process is super simple because it can all be done right from your smartphone. Seeing if you have a case can be done in 8 clicks or less. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. Let me go into this lawsuit. And to be clear, we don't have a copy of this lawsuit, but this is based on reporting of what the lawsuit states. So John Doe alleged that Buzbee had sent him a letter, it's called a demand letter, threatening to unleash, quote, entirely fabricated and malicious allegations of sexual assault, including multiple instances of rape of a minor, both male and female, against plaintiff if he refused to comply with their demands. Now, the lawsuit reportedly goes on to say that Buzbee's letter accused the John Doe of raping males and females while they were under the influence of drugs at parties hosted by Sean Combs. The plaintiff claims that Buzbee targeted individuals connected to P. Diddy and that he, quote, devised a scheme to obtain payments through the use of coercive threats from anyone with ties to Combs, no matter how remote. And he even allegedly targeted people he knew would suffer the most, because the complaint alleges defendants specifically targeted high-profile individuals who would suffer immeasurable loss from being specifically accused of committing sex crimes, including drugging and raping minors, even if those allegations are false. So, Melba, what are your thoughts on this alleged extortion plot coming from an attorney who, by the way, last month announced that he has received thousands of calls, is representing over 100 people claiming to be victims? He admitted that people have already settled their claim, have already called him to settle with him so that the lawsuits wouldn't be filed, so they wouldn't be identified. Your take?
And that's always the concern, right? In terms of whether or not justice is being circumvented in some way, or people are basically paying just so that they don't get criminally charged, rightfully or wrongfully so. It's still problematic, right? So.
Is it standard? Is it standard? That's a fair question. Is this standard what Tony Buzbee's doing?
I think it's fairly standard, because all he's doing, he's being a clearinghouse for all these survivors or alleged survivors, right? So they're calling him saying, this is what happened. He then vets them to decide whether or not they have a credible story, see if it can be corroborated, see if they could even move forward to trial. My understanding, and I don't know him, I have no dog in that fight, but my understanding is that he has turned down certain survivors because he's like, there's not enough there for me to move forward. So you have to have some evidence to move forward with a good faith basis for your lawsuit. And if he feels that a certain victim or survivor doesn't have it, then he's not moving forward with it. So,
well, here's the thing, right? In a perfect world, everybody who files a lawsuit believes in the claims that they're filing. That's not always the case, right? Perfect world, right? Doesn't mean that they're going to win a trial, but you want to believe that they're going forward with the cases they think they can win. I guess the concern is, if you're a high-profile celebrity and you're getting this letter and you're like, these claims are totally false. Tony Buzbee might believe they're true, but they're totally false. Me being named in this lawsuit, me even fighting it, that's a problem for me. That's already created me. Everybody's waiting for a name to be listed. So is it fair? I'm not innocent until proven guilty anymore. I'm not, not liable anymore. As soon as I'm named in this lawsuit, my career is over. I have no choice but to pay. And there's something, and it's funny because I've spoken about this before, where people say there's something feels a little wrong about what Tony Buzbee's doing. So that's why I asked you, is it standard?
Yeah, I mean, it is standard in terms of reaching out and saying, "Hey, listen, I've been contacted by someone who is looking to file a lawsuit against you,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Here's where we think we're going. Do you want to settle? Let's settle right now before we even put anyone through this drama, before we have to make the survivor testify, before we have to do depositions and go through the whole process. Maybe we could just settle right off the bat." That's normal, right?
Yeah.
But that fear, and I'm with you on that, Jesse, that fear of, I could fight this, but I'm going to lose so much more in the
Yeah.
long run, that could be a deterrent and would make someone pay up. But at the same token, I'm hopeful that if you are wrongfully being accused of this, I mean, if it was me, heaven forbid, I think I would go on the offensive and name myself. I would come out and say, listen, I have been, Tony Buzbee reached out to me saying that so and so alleged that I did XYZ to them. I categorically deny it. And basically, you come out on the offensive before anything gets
Yeah.
filed. So that could maybe deter the case from moving forward, possibly.
The other argument is for Tony Buzbee. Hey, you know what? I didn't have to give you a demand letter. I didn't have to let you know. I could have just filed this lawsuit, named you. You would have already, your career would have been done. How embarrassing that would be for you. I'm giving you a chance to get out of this.
Yeah, and that's the way I'm sure he's thinking about it, right? That he's not only sparing his client the agony of having to go through a trial, but you're also helping the defendant out in terms of, hey, you can resolve this quietly without completely destroying your career. But again, to me, is that justice? I don't know.
Yeah.
It depends on what the survivor wants and how they want to move forward. But to me, it's about naming and shaming and putting the people out there that have cooperated and enabled Sean
Right.
Diddy Combs to do what he did to so many people over decades.
Melba, going back to something that you mentioned, right? So we don't really know who this John Doe is. It's apparently somebody who's well known, has attended events with Diddy. Hasn't really said they're friends with Diddy, though. But let's say, these allegations are not true. Could you see this lawsuit, who may very well be an associate of Diddy, to try to divert accusations away, right? That I think that's an interesting point about it, is trying to divert accusations away from him and Sean Combs.
Yeah, I mean, and again, yes, I could be very jaded and I want to be wrong. Let's be very clear on that. But I do get that feeling that this is a way to muddy the waters and to say that, are all these survivors really survivors? Is this really just a big extortion claim? And that's part of the argument that Diddy has been using and through his attorneys, that basically these are all, he said he categorically denies any of these allegations, and that this is just all a play for publicity and for money. So it's a similar argument that he makes in his own case in chief for the human trafficking that is showing up in this particular lawsuit, which the coincidence was too much for me. That's
Well, let me ask you this. One of the things that's listed in the lawsuit are these prior instances where Tony Buzbee allegedly had tried this tactic. So there's one instance named in this lawsuit involving NFL player Deshaun Watson, who was accused by several women of sexual misconduct. Buzbee was representing the accusers, and the suit reportedly claims that Buzbee tried to force Watson into a settlement by making false claims that purportedly would not stand up in court. Another case mentioned is the Green Bay Packers kicker Brandon McManus, and in his case, Buzbee allegedly threatened to sue over accusations of sexual assault. But the NFL investigated the claims, found that there was no evidence. The case was closed. Melba, thoughts on those prior cases, how they might play into this current lawsuit?
so. If there is clearly even though this is a civil lawsuit, it's almost like a common plan or scheme, right? And so if you're always approaching these cases in the same way, where it's very light on facts, very heavy in basically pay up or else, that can show that this is a pattern and this is how he conducts business, which gives more credibility to what the defendant is saying in this particular instance. However, just because you represent someone and their case falls apart doesn't mean they weren't telling the truth. So much like in a criminal case, you may be defending someone who is accused of murder. Doesn't mean that they did it. It just means that they're accused of it. And that maybe the case falls apart. You end up getting a not guilty, or the case ends up being dropped by the prosecutor. It happens. So I don't think necessarily the fact that the case ended up being closed means that the football player didn't do anything. But at the same token, it is a cause for concern as to whether or not, he's extorting people and pushing the envelope a little too far.
Now, Tony Buzbee, he actually appeared in a TMZ documentary on Tubi. It's called The Downfall of Diddy Inside the Freak-Offs. And he was asked about how he was handling these civil lawsuits against Combs. And he essentially admitted that part of his strategy is to include embarrassing or damaging information in his demand letters. And he explains it's the game. He explained that by doing this, he pressures people into paying money to avoid public exposure of this information. Whether or not that information that he included is true or not, that's a separate issue that wasn't addressed. But Melba, I'm thinking about this and I'm wondering, let's say this actually goes to a trial and there's a negative result for Tony Buzbee. Does that jeopardize all of the cases that have been filed or will be filed against Sean Combs?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If Tony Buzbee ends up being, getting a judgment against him in terms of how he acted in this case, that's going to cast doubt on any of the settlements he already got in terms of, was that as a result of extortion or was that as a result of, someone truly is like, yeah, okay, I was involved in this. Let me resolve it quietly. You have that. And then you have the pending lawsuits where now you have an attorney that has been discredited. And so how do you move forward as a survivor when your attorney is basically persona non grata? How does that move your case forward? It doesn't. So all of these survivors will now have to find likely alternative counsel. So there's huge ripple effects that could come from this. So I really hope for the survivor's sake, because they've been through so much. And now to have a situation where the civil case becomes even muddier, because they could not get resolution in criminal court, maybe, statute of limitations. This happened 20 years ago. They didn't feel that they could come forward. Maybe they couldn't do something under the Adult Survivors Act in New York or California or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I'm worried about the survivors and the effect that's going to have on them.
It's interesting. So this John Doe basically claims that Buzbee gave him a ticking clock on what to do. And I want to read you some statements from both sides. And then my question to you is going to be, because of this lawsuit, is Tony Buzbee going to stop doing this tactic? Is he just now going to continue to file lawsuits but name people? So keep that in mind. But this is what the Quinn Emanuel law firm representing John Doe is saying. They issued a statement following the suit saying, Buzbee has established a pattern of leaving baseless, fabricated, and malicious allegations at high-profile individuals and threatening to name them publicly if they fail to pay exorbitant sums of money. Buzbee then uses this money to fund his lavish lifestyle. He has deployed these threats in letters, statements to the press, his website, and on social media in recent months to try to shake down these well-known individuals. Now, Tony Buzbee has denied these accusations, saying the lawsuit is just an attempt to stop him from doing his job. He even fired back with a statement of his own to the Houston Chronicle, saying that the claims are without merit and laughable. We won't allow the powerful and their high-dollar lawyers to intimidate or silence sexual assault survivors. It is obvious that the frivolous lawsuit filed against my firm is an aggressive attempt to intimidate or silence me and ultimately my clients. That effort is a gross miscalculation. I am a U.S. Marine. I won't be silenced or intimidated. And Buzbee went on to say that he sent letters, but those are part of the normal legal process, that these letters are not threats, but they're just requests to try to settle the case privately before going to court. The letters were sent seeking a confidential mediation in lieu of filing a lawsuit. No amount of money was included in the demand letters. No threats were made. The demand letters sent are no different than the ones routinely sent by lawyers across the country in all types of cases. Melba, your reaction to both statements, and also, do you think this is going to deter Tony Buzbee from doing what he's been doing?
I don't think it's going to deter him, especially if the letters at issue are, again, standard boilerplate language. Basically like, hey, you're being named in this particular lawsuit. Here are the options available. We can have mediation. We can maybe come up with a settlement, whatever the case may be. Contact my office. Let's set up an appointment. The threat is not blatant, right? But the threat is also implied, because the reality is, that if you don't agree to do mediation or go down that path, there's going to be a lawsuit filed and your name is going to be named and all the collateral consequences that come with that. So, but I don't see him changing his tactic. But I really do see that concern in terms of what is it going to mean for the survivors? Are they now going to feel silent? Are they now going to be less or more reluctant to come forward to any attorney because of fear that their case is going to end up, getting caught in some weird matrix and that it can't move forward, or, it's not even about the facts anymore. It's about all these other issues. And that is even more traumatizing to a survivor and would make them less likely to want to come forward and report. To me, it's just another barrier or boundary, so to speak, that's going to impact survivors. So, but I kind of agree with him, though, on his statements.
So big picture here, Melba, as we're thinking about this, right? Sean Combs, currently sitting in the MDC, he's facing sex trafficking, racketeering, transportation to engage in prostitution charges. He's facing so many different lawsuits, including those filed by Tony Buzbee, where you have people say that they were drugged and assaulted by Combs when they were minors. I mean, this is really, really sadistic, disgusting stuff we're talking about. Even though they're allegations, right? It's still just kind of hard to process. But my question is, do you think that if Buzbee continues to file more of these lawsuits, either the way he's doing it now or maybe change up tactics, he says it's not just Sean Combs is involved, but other celebrities. He's listed them out, not by name, but celebrity A, celebrity B. Are we going to know eventually who these people are?
I hope so. Because I very much want to know who celebrity A and celebrity B is, especially as alleged to have raped a young child. I wouldn't want to be supporting them in any way, buying their music or watching their movies or whatever the case may be, if that's the kind of person that they are. So I hope we get to know who these celebrities are. And again, also for closure and for transparency, so people know who they're dealing with. And again, Sean Diddy Combs did not do this alone. This was not in a vacuum.
Yeah.
This was the rich and powerful of Hollywood converging, getting together in these parties to abuse women, boys.
Well, that's the point, right? Is it fair that they can get out of this? Assuming all of this is true. It's not, I mean, we don't know if it's true, but assuming all of this is true, is it fair that they get out of it by just paying a settlement?
I don't think it's fair. I think they should be named and shamed. Period. End of story.
So in other words, you're saying Tony Buzbee should actually, if he believes he's got the goods, he should file these lawsuits against everybody and name names.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe his tactic was just trying to expedite things because, again, if you're having hundreds and hundreds of people, that means hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits and being bogged down in the legal process for years. So he's like, listen, let me see if I can expedite this. You get these people settlements and then they can move on with their lives and we go on to the next one. But, I think that if these letters are so problematic, then maybe John Doe has just destroyed it for everyone else because now moving forward, he would just name and shame and move forward from there. I don't know if that's necessarily more preferable, but that may be what we're left with depending on the outcome of this trial.
We shall see, and we'll see if Tony Buzbee does do this, whether or not someone else will join John Doe in the lawsuit and say, same thing happened to me. So a lot of moving parts. Melba Pearson, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.